They came for the bridge at dawn. I heard metal, the kind of scraping that makes your stomach drop, and when I stepped out barefoot onto the porch, there it was, a silhouette crouched over the planks, a glint of steel between their hands. 5:17 on my phone, and for a second I thought I was dreaming, until Hank started barking like the old days, loud and furious, and the shape froze. That was the morning I realized people would trade history for a parking spot and call it community improvement. My name is Daniel Hargrove. That bridge, the one with the stepped planks and the carved initials on the rail, my grandfather built it in '63 by hand, with nails he saved from a ship he once worked on, and a cedar post from a tree he swore looked like a man leaning over the water. My father widened it a little, taught me how to balance on the beams when I was 7, told me the creek remembers the ones who build with their hands. It wasn't just wood and rope to us, it was the spine of a family's memory. So when I found an orange notice stapled to my mailbox saying that the community council had voted to reclaim access, I laughed at first, then the laugh got bitter, and then I burned the paper in the coffee can beside the shed, mostly because burning feels like an act, and I needed something to do that would steady my hands. Marta Ellison led the council. Marta had the kind of smile that could put a camera crew at ease, polished, sympathetic, and a way of saying, for the good of everyone, like it was a hymn. Gideon Ross carried a clipboard and a walkie-talkie like he owned the airwaves. They called themselves guardians of property values, of neighborhood standards, but what they really wanted was control: who comes and goes, who gets to park boats by the bank, whose family history counts. You learn quickly that when power smells like revenue, consent becomes negotiable. At first, the coercion looked like bureaucracy. Meetings scheduled at times the older folks couldn't attend, a petition with signatures that looked oddly uniform, safety posts hammered onto the creek bank with a friendly memo saying they'd protect children and pets. They phrased everything in concern and procedural language, developer-sounding terms, slides with graphs, and in the room where they presented it, Marta's voice was smooth. I remember standing there, deed in my pocket, feeling like an animal in an examination. I asked where the council got its authority, and someone laughed, a soft sound that meant the question made no small difference. Then Gideon leaned forward and said, "You sure you want to make a scene, Dan?" Like the very idea of a person defending his own land was a breach of etiquette. So I started documenting. It was boring, tedious work at first, scanning photocopied deeds, pulling county maps at the clerk's office, asking neighbors whether they'd signed anything. Then the small shocks piled up. A developer's letter from 50 years ago misquoted to suggest easement, a notarized signature that didn't match anyone we knew, a line on a map that someone colored in. I put a trail camera near the bridge because it seemed sensible, and because nights have a way of telling truths louder than daytime smiles. People nodding at slides about liability, access management. I stood up. I had the deed and the old photographs, my grandfather's rough handwriting on a plaque, and I held them up for everyone to see. Marta's smile flickered. Gideon's fingers tightened on his clipboard. "Mr. Hargrove," Marta said, with that same calm, "those are sentimental, but sentiment doesn't override regulation." I remember how the room seemed to inhale, like someone had told everyone to play along. Then a woman in the back, a neighbor, Mrs. Larkin, who'd always brought pies to summer potlucks, spoke up slowly. "Ethan's right," she said. Though Ethan wasn't his name, she meant me, and the room shifted. Small cracks. They tried tactics that would make you think they were bureaucrats, not bullies. Notices, polite letters, and offer to put a plaque if I'd cooperate. When I refused the plaque, "No, thanks, we don't want their congratulations," they started showing up at the property line with men who took pictures of my driveway, wrote down license plates, asked questions about whether the bridge was a public thoroughfare. Threats escalated into theft, garden hoses gone, survey stakes pulled, a storm of flyers left under my door labeling me non-compliant. One night, a truck idling in the dark on my neighbor's road, 2 silhouettes fiddling with bolt cutters. That was the camera's footage that won't ever feel like anything less than proof that people will try to erase you if you make them uncomfortable. You need allies. I found ours in unlikely places. Deputy June Alvarez, who showed up after the bolt cutter footage, uniform slung over a rail like she'd grown out of the job and into being human. Rita Cole, a lawyer who drinks too much black coffee and hates bad affidavits. Hank, who doesn't understand law but understands boundaries. He snarled once at Gideon, and that little sound made Gideon flinch like a child. We gathered everything. The deed, the chain of title, the old postcards with the bridge in the corner, the county tax rolls that listed our parcel since before the council was a thought in someone's head. We compiled a box of evidence, and then we did something I never thought I'd do. We filed. Court feels strange if you've never been there. Fluorescent lights, a jigsaw of chairs, people performing their civility. Marta wore a blue dress that matched her press photos. Gideon had his clipboard, and the council had a lawyer whose smile was a different kind of polished. In the courtroom, facts matter, and facts are not moved by charm. Rita walked through the timeline like a slow, sure-tied documents, timestamps. The trail cam frame where the bolt cutters pause under the bridge at 5:17. The council tried to argue easement by community necessity, to paint the bridge as a liability and their takeover as altruism. The judge watched, and then looked at the photographs, and then at the ledger of signatures that showed forgery. When the county surveyor took the stand and traced the old boundary lines, I felt the air change as if someone finally opened a window in a stuffy room. The game changed after that morning. There were no dramatic arrests on my porch. Real life rarely resembles television, but there were citations, official letters demanding the council stop tampering, a slow unspooling of the council's authority. People who had deferred to Marta's smile started whispering about motives. Gideon stopped showing up to the community meetings. The council's leader announced a restructuring, whatever that means when your structure relies on the quiet consent of neighbors. We won an injunction that kept anyone from altering the bridge without my permission, and the judge ordered a hearing where evidence would be weighed on the record. It was enough, mostly, but it wasn't everything. After the courtroom, the creek felt different. The bridge, which had always creaked under my boots, creaked with a lighter sound. Not victory, not exactly, but relief tempered by the knowledge that power can be patient. The council didn't vanish. It shrank and then reshaped itself before anyone knew what hit them. Marta sent me a letter that was all courtesy and thin regret, and I folded it, kept it in a drawer, and then let the drawer shut. It's about how a polished smile can be a kind of erasure, how papers and memos sometimes hide motives, and how ordinary people, the ones who pack the potluck pies and throw their money at small repairs, can find themselves edged out when governance becomes an industry. If there's a lesson, it's this: document your history, keep your papers, talk to your neighbors before the meeting is scheduled for a time they can't make. And when the silence gets heavy, point a light at it. There's a final scene that stays with me. Me and Hank, standing on the bridge at sunset, hands in my pockets, watching the light stitch silver across the water. Someone once asked me whether I felt angry at Marta, at Gideon, at everyone who made a career out of convenience. I did, and sometimes I still do, but mostly I felt tired, the kind of tired that isn't the end of anything. It's the reminder that you were willing to stand. Hank nosed my palm, and then lay his head on my boot, patient and steady. I thought of my grandfather and how he'd hammer another nail, as if building keeps you honest. So tell me, if you were standing where I was, would you stand? Was I right to fight, or should I have sold the bridge for the price of quiet? Drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Fairness versus practicality, history versus progress, neighbor against neighbor, which side do you land on? If you like this story, share it with someone who cares about small battles that mean a lot. And if you've got a story like this from your town, put it in the comments. We learn more from each other than from polished speeches.